AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to AutoLine After Hours. Going to have an interesting conversation today. What's the most reliable cars that you can buy? And we're going to get into that because we've got Jason Norton from JD Power, who's going to help us dig into all the latest data that they've got from their vehicle dependability study. And we've got Jackie Charniga from the Detroit Free Press joining us too. And Jackie, great to have you here. And Jason, you too.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
But so first off, maybe people don't know, they hear a lot of JD Power acronyms, IQS, Initial Quality Survey, exactly. VDS, Vehicle Dependability Survey or Study.
Yep.
So explain VDS.
So perfect. Thanks for the segue and thanks for having me on today. So our initial quality study is measuring 90 days of ownership, where our vehicle dependability study is measuring 3 years of ownership. So at JD Power, we have that ability to really track that full ownership experience through our various studies that we have. And the latest one, of course, that just came out in February was our vehicle dependability study.
I like the VDS because, you know, the IQS measures quality after 90 days of ownership, correct, right? Yeah. All right, we're being joined by David Kiley. David, come on in, man. Have a seat. Let's put a microphone on you. Sean can help you on that. Yep, no problem. So just so everybody knows, David Kiley's from Wards, and we're talking vehicle dependability study. So anyway, as I was saying, I like measuring after 3 years of ownership, because I like to say after 90 days, come on, everything should work, right?
Exactly. You would hope so anyway, but yeah, you know, obviously our data shows there's some issues with those 90 days of ownership vehicles as well. But yeah, with 3 years of ownership, you really start to see where those broken out working areas, where are those different areas where you're having software issues that are continuous throughout that ownership period. So, you know, really diving deep into each of those issues is what we're able to do. And of course, our vehicle dependability study, just like all of our studies, is true voice of the customer. So we're asking real customers, real owners of these vehicles, what are these different issues? And we measure 9 different categories within our study that really looks at infotainment, exterior, driving assistance, all those different powertrain aspects. So really diving into that full vehicle experience that they're having at that 3 years.
I didn't mean to overreact to infotainment, but that one's the worst, in my opinion.
It is the worst scoring category in our study as well. So it's most problematic for many customers.
What don't you like, Jackie?
Well, I have a cell phone. And it does a lot of things. And it does a lot of things better than my vehicle does. And I don't think there's too much crossover that needs to happen between what a vehicle can do and what my phone can do. I'm supposed to be, when I'm behind the wheel, as far as I know, driving. And it's just a huge distraction.
That's right. Yeah, that bringing your own device into the vehicle is definitely what's really problematic for a lot of customers. So connectivity, we were talking about this before the show, you know, that Bluetooth pairing is really one of the top problems. Android Auto, Apple CarPlay experience is the top problem in the industry. So all these different device related activities that the customer's having, even OEM app is becoming more and more problematic in the industry. So definitely that device, customers just want to say, hey, this is my life. I want to bring it into my vehicle and continue my experience. So,
well, to your point, John, measuring how people feel about a new telecommunications and system that they're maybe are unfamiliar with in the first 90 days, I have to believe that the complaints hit the ceiling. Whereas over 3 years, you kind of figure out, you know, how different things work. But the larger problem, I'd be curious if you agree. I heard a great term. I'm not going to take credit for it. Menu bloat. I think that is one of the great descriptors of you know, when there's just too much stuff that you have to cycle through to do what you want. But I love that term. I feel like I want to make it the permanent name of a column.
That is funny. And it is true, right? So a lot of customers, there's a lot of new features. So OEMs, of course, want to put these new features into the head unit, let customers find them. Surprise and delight as features is what we like to say. But it also becomes very overwhelming. So, and especially when you're getting in and out of the vehicle, if I just go get a cup of coffee and I get back in my vehicle, now I got to search all the way back through my menu to find out where I was in my last place that took me so long to find before. So a lot of that is coming through in that 3 years of ownership.
Give me 1 sec, and then you, Jackie. What is it? I mean, pairing a phone to a car, it's been around for years and years and years now. Some automakers really, really good at it. You know, I'll cite the Hyundai group. Hyundai, Kia seem to be good. Toyota seems to be really good. Others, you know, I'll try to pair the phone, and I'll start, you know, the search on my phone, and just nothing happens. So I stop that, and then I start the search with the car, and then I do my phone, then everything's fine.
Yep.
And then on other cars, it's the exact opposite way. And why have they not figured this out by now?
You know, everyone is working really hard with it, but as we know, technology is continuously updating on cell phones, so things are happening faster on cell phones.
So maybe part of it's the phone problem?
I don't know if you can necessarily attribute it to the phone, but maybe it's not the software, the OEM keeping up with the phone software, so it's making that compatibility issue. Also, we see a lot of issues when there's multiple phones. So if a user has 2 phones, maybe they connect a work phone, or they have a significant other's phone in the vehicle as well. So that priority of phones is where we see a lot of issues. So, if your partner moves your vehicle, all of a sudden they're the number one vehicle or the number one phone within the vehicle, then you get in the vehicle and you can't find it, right?
I'm smiling and laughing because we have this problem in our house where my partner, it's primarily her car, but both of our phones are connected. Right. There's history there. But it's like, I'll actually wire mine in, but it's reading hers, which is on Bluetooth. Then I have to go muck around with something else. But to your point on Hyundai, I just want to say over a long period of time, I have a lot of experience with Hyundai, Kia, Tech Center and stuff. They do some of the best research, like beta testing, seeing what the consumer wants and all of that. I have worked closely with another company among the Detroit 3. They're terrible at this. They don't beta test. They don't do real life consumer. How is this going to work for the consumer? They say they do. Believe me, it's not. So I think culture is actually culture at different companies is one of the separators on how good these things are over time.
I hope I don't reveal which Detroit 3 member with my anecdote that is completely unrelated, but I had a similar experience. You mentioned the phrase surprise and delight between these features. Mine was more of surprise and dismay because I was trying to help my father with his Jeep Wrangler, and he wanted to know how to use the map feature. And it took us about 90 days to realize there was no map feature. They just wanted it to come from your phone. Yeah. Now, I feel like that's an interesting point. What do automakers feel they have to build themselves versus what the phone comes with already? And what are customers more likely to use? And what's a more seamless experience? But nobody told us that his vehicle no longer had a map. And that became an issue, especially if he's relying on that to not even determine where his vehicle is, but what direction it's facing in some spaces.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's a challenge right now in the industry as a whole. I think everyone's aware of it. Just figuring out how to implement new technology pieces into the vehicle, how to make those customer experiences really, move on past, what they're able to update or not update within these in-vehicle systems. So, I think that's just the push and pull, what we're seeing in the industry right now. But, I don't know if anyone really has that solved yet. I think there's a lot of different viewpoints and the ways that each different OEM is trying to take. But, right now, I don't know if there's a good direction.
Surprise and delight should go well beyond the telecommunications and the interface, right? So awards, right? We're evaluating our 10 best user interface and interior designs. And some of the things that I encourage us to look for, one of my favorite surprise and delights, I asked the OEM when they first introduced it, how much did this cost? Because it's great. And they said, oh, it didn't cost anything. It was just a software thing. And I'll tell you what it was. And this is the kind of thing that companies overlook. Nissan, when they first introduced this, they were one of the first ones, if not the first one, to tell you which tire was low. After everybody had to do the Tread Act tire pressure monitors, which one? And then when you got out to put some air in the tire, the horn beeps when it reaches optimal PSI. And I just thought, how much did that cost? Because it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Nothing. It was just software.
That would be helpful. That would have been helpful in February when I was putting air into my tire.
Yeah. I mean, it's those simple things. I don't understand why every company, it's not a patent thing, why every company hasn't copied it.
Yeah.
So,
It's interesting. We're talking about all this connectivity and infotainment and all that, because years ago on the vehicle dependability survey, it would have been like oil leaks on the garage floor. It would have been a rattle in the trunk. It would have been a transmission that crapped out. So has the industry fixed those old problems?
No, those old problems are still prevalent as well. But there are new problems that are overtaking those problems. So when we look at our industry as a whole, or our study as a whole, we group things into problem aggregates. So we can look at things like broken not working, poor performance. So that's more connectivity, things like that. But we also look at software defects. Software defects this year had a 20% increase year over year. So it was the highest increase percentage-wise by any of the problem aggregates that we have. But when we look at the top problem overall, it's still the broken not working, which this year made over a quarter of the problems of the study. So still very problematic across the industry, but we are seeing that software defect related areas, infotainment related areas really taking over some of those issues.
So I have a question about the study itself. Would it be too expensive or too problematic to extend it even longer to like 5 years instead of 3?
That's a great point. I mean, that's a big topic within our organization right now, as well as maybe understanding these longer term ownership periods. We know that people are holding onto vehicles longer and longer.
If you look at past cars, it's 14 years. I mean, combined with trucks, it's like 12.4 or whatever. But
and by the way, most bumper to bumper warranties, I don't know, I'd have to look at every automaker, but so many of them end at 36,000 miles, 3 years, 36.
Yeah.
But there's not that much stuff that's going to go wrong. But, the 17 minutes after my warranty expired, I had a part in my car break. It was like a $40 part. It cost like almost $3,000 to replace because they had to pull the whole dashboard. None of it was covered. So.
Yeah, we know there's a big focus. I'd say our organization, but our organization also, we're working with a lot of OEMs. That's a big point of topic for them too, is understanding these longer term ownership periods and what maybe they're able to do to implement and help these customers out during those periods of time, for sure.
I had a question that I sort of want to ask the group, because I've recently returned to automotive journalism and I haven't been in the game for a while, but I wanted to kind of go back to cell phones a little bit. So we talk about how technology changes quickly, and it seems like cell phones are the most important tool that we have that's changing. And from my experiences, we used to be able to tell fashion, like, an image could tell you what decade and what was happening culturally or politically. And, I would be watching a television program and I'd see a Ford Flex and I knew it was 2009. But when it comes to what is the difference between the newest, latest vehicles and what makes a new car new, feel new from a customer perspective and is worth the price tag, I want to know what that means anymore. It used to be cup holders. This car has 12 cup holders, whatever. And when it's just, you can only tell something's a period piece based on if it's a flip phone or a smartphone. What is the distinguishing factor with the vehicles? I've had a chance to talk to some designers, and even Cadillac, their concept car just has the DeLorean doors, and we always use the Jetsons as a touch point as what the future is going to be like. But from what customers think when they get into a new vehicle, what is the thing that makes it new? Because talking to Edmunds, talking to Cox and other people, they would always say, if you want a new car that you can afford, your new car is 3 years old. Get that one instead. So what is your take doing the study, and you guys from covering this industry? What do you guys think?
Maybe I'll let you guys go first.
Well, number one, I think it's a great question. Great question. And I would say it kind of depends on the vehicle or vehicle segment.
Yeah.
So like if you're talking Mustang, Corvette, boy, the product development guys, I say guys, gals too, it's the Michigan
offended.
Guys.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They got a laser-like focus. Boy, do they understand what that customer wants. Probably full-size pickup buyers too. Boom, you know exactly what those people want. When you get into other, let's say, mid-market family sedans, that gets really hard because you're trying to appeal to such a broad base of owners that have all kinds of different needs and wants, demographic, psychographic. So yeah, I would say styling still counts, both inside and outside. and then, having some kind of cool feature. And I can't think of one right off the top of my head. Well, I'll say something like 4-wheel steering. That's where you bring your friends and neighbors over and go, look at this thing. Look at it crab walk. I mean, and everybody stands agog at what it can do, even though you're never, ever going to really use it unless you're a hardcore off-roader. So, I mean, that's kind of my reaction to your question, but it's a hell of a good question.
Well, you take a look at the RAV4, for example, the Toyota RAV4, which was the best-selling car last year. I think that is an example of a car that, in terms of the guts, the platform and things like that, it should just be continuous improvement. The days of you and I have been around long enough. We remember when I'm trying to remember.
By the way, David's indicating towards me when he says you and I have been around a long time.
That we remember going to the Detroit Auto Show when Chrysler CEO Bob Eaton wanted to make a point about how everything had changed in one model to the next, and I can't remember which model it was, but he threw a bag of parts and he said this is the only thing that carried over from last generation to this generation. He wanted to emphasize this is all new. You know what? People buying RAV4s don't care if the thing is all new. They care about continuous improvement and maybe a tweak on the external styling to mirror kind of current fashion trends or something like that. But man, people buying RAV4s and Camrys, and they just want to see that it feels new. It's smarter than the last one I bought, and that's pretty much it.
And to get back to our subject matter expert here, they want dependability. I mean, that's why so many people buy Toyotas. Toyota
Absolutely.
always does very well in the survey.
That's right.
But this year, General Motors, my jaw dropped when I saw how well the GM brands did in the survey.
General Motors had a great year this year. So they had 20 award-eligible models. 15 of them actually were in the top 3 within their individual segments. So really almost their whole portfolio was within that top 3 within those individual segments. Toyota, still very, very strong though. I mean, when you look at them and General Motors, they each received 6 segment awards, but the number 1 overall nameplate this year was Lexus. So really moving up. Number 1 mass market brand this year was Buick. So that was a great, great improvement for them. Toyota actually did fall to that number 2 when it comes to mass market overall. But when we look at all those different pieces of what these companies are doing, it's really just focusing on those customer needs and trying to improve their products, right? So go back to your question, what is the biggest thing? A lot of it is coming down to functionality, making things easier to operate for customers. So we know technology, maybe not making that point, but that's the point of technology, is to make things easier on the customer. But there is still a bridge that they're trying to gap right now for that. But overall, I think it's a lot of that is coming down to functional behavior. So RAV4, that's more utilitarian, right? It's someone who wants things to function right. I want my space to be right. I want my cup holders to work. I want to be able to have good storage. All those different aspects, does create this new sense if I'm able to make things just that little bit better for the customer. So that's what I was really focused on. But of course, quality is what we're.
The other thing that jumps out at me, GM and Toyota, the biggest car companies in the U.S. market, both of them above average. When you're that big, and I'll put the two together, when you got the number 1 and number 2, it's hard to be above average, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just from a numbers standpoint. What is it about them that they did so well?
When you look at these brands, it's really designing in quality. So we have the ability to separate design, which we consider difficult to use, difficult to operate sides of things, versus a broken or difficult malfunction side of things. So when we look at those, they're at the top of the rank charts when it comes to that design aspect. So again, making things easy to work, or as best as they can for their customers to make things easy to work. So designing in quality really helps elevate them. So over the 3 years of ownership, if there is a defect or malfunction, you don't have to worry about the design of things. You can actually just chase down what's being broken and how to fix that over that ownership period. So,
but if it's in the center of the vehicle and you've got to rip the whole thing apart,
I think
not great.
I think GM culturally has gone through a pretty impressive transition of improving design. I think that their improving quality. I think their EV stuff is great. And just a little thing which I've cited in quotes, they're also become the most efficient OEM manufacturer in the world. When you look at employees per vehicle, or vehicles per employee. But I did this breakdown, and it's really impressive. You know, they continually, you don't see a massive restructuring layoff or something like that at GM. What they do it all the time. They keep rationalizing and optimizing their workforce to what they need and where the market's going. Hey, is that hard on people who wind up having a shift? Absolutely.
But what you're saying is that they're sounding more and more like Toyota.
I have to do a more in-depth analysis of the numbers, but because Toyota and GM have certain automotive operations and employees. But if you look at the number of vehicles to employee ratio, GM kills the competition. It's like up around 36 or 37 vehicles per employee. Toyota's if you just do it that way, Toyota's in the upper 20s. But I think almost nobody else is in the 30s. And so GM has just done a really good job, I think, of changing their culture under Mary Barra, and Mark Royce and some of the other people. I know that you had a very illustrious guest last year, a former GM executive who we all love, who was bashing the culture at GM. I kind of feel like that's out of date. The culture that I'll just say, is it Bob Lutz? I love Bob. We all love Bob. But I feel like the description of GM's culture by Bob is out of date, for what's been happening the last 5 to 10 years.
Can you contextualize that entire phenomenon? So is it when you're trimming the fat of your employee payroll, you have more for R&D? You can fixate more on the vehicles themselves?
There's an enterprise cost to having too many people. I mean, I've worked at a couple of, closely, not as an employee of the OEM, but as a supplier. And when you keep after the headcount, and you don't let headcount that isn't optimal to the direction you're going, when you keep attacking that, it reduces the enterprise cost of wasted time and time that is just misspent in the wrong directions.
But is the best way to do that, say, have every employee justify what they did the week before?
I don't think. I don't know what the system is at General Motors, but I wasn't going to talk politics, but
we can't. Not for this.
But I also don't think that approach that we're seeing in the news is very useful or productive to employees or culture either. I mean, I just think GM is doing a much more professional, systematic, deliberate, consistent level that because we're not saying, oh my God, we have 10,000 too many employees. What I haven't seen that in some time from GM. I'm just really impressed the way Mary Barra has changed the culture over the last 10 years.
I think I'm very interested, obviously, in where that culture is going. And yes, I'm the GM reporter for the Free Press, so I'm more interested than I am in anything else. But the culture has to be fixated on a goal and a mission. And that's something that I'm very eager to figure out. So in terms of what makes a vehicle that we drive today safe, dependable, useful, safe being the first thing, because obviously GM talks a lot about zero emissions, zero accidents, everything that they're working towards. But when I ask that question about what makes a vehicle new or what are the features that it should have, I'm seeing, in my experience, limited though it may be, more and more conversations around what could a vehicle be other than a thing you drive. Mm-hmm. And that's something I'd like to ask the group as well. In terms of your ideal vehicle, and a lot of people I've discussed this with at GM, obviously in the assisted driver program and autonomy, we all saw what happened with Cruise. And that's another point of consolidating, getting experts into this system they've already had and getting rid of some employees that might not be doing what they needed to do. But then you have a vehicle that is a living room, a kitchen, a sensory deprivation tank, a spa. Like, what is a vehicle going to be? And is all the technology we have going to assist the driver for now until it takes over completely.
Mhm.
So I'd like to ask that as well. What a car should be, and what we're not trying to make it fly anymore. It looks like we're just trying to make it.
Some people are.
I want to interview them. Just make it think for itself.
Look, it depends on the individual. What does an individual want out of their car? You know, if I'm buying, I go back to the Corvette, the Mustang, I'll throw in Porsche, BMW M's, and the list goes on and on. The hell if I want the car to drive me. I'm buying that car to drive it. But, you know, enthusiasts comprise roughly 10% of the market. 90% would love to have the spa, the deprivation tank, the living room, the kitchen, and have this car do everything for them in their daily commute. You know, who wants to drive in stop and go traffic? I've never met anybody that wants to drive in stop and go traffic, but for millions of people who work, that's the everyday reality. So yeah, if I can push a button and it goes fully autonomous, woohoo, I'm all for it.
Yes, for that driving situation. Then I want to be able to turn it off. You know, when I want to take control of the vehicle, and I think that's where we are. It's funny when you said the spa thing. The car that I immediately think of is the Lincoln, you know, that's made in Japan, and you got the aromatherapy. China. Sorry.
The Nautilus.
And the aromatherapy. And I'm sitting there, and there's this whole phenomenon that's being explained to me about people who want to pull into their driveways and stay in their cars. And I just thought, how many people is this?
Depends how many kids you have, I guess.
Well,
how your marriage is doing.
So somebody told me this is where the origin of the car is. That in China, it's where it's made. It's much more of a thing because people have smaller residences. They might have, you know, several kids, and this is more of a thing. Now, I happen to be driving with a friend of mine, and she said when we tested the vehicle, she's like, "Oh, I'm all over this," and you know, and I thought, maybe, I don't know, is there a gender split in all of that? Because when I get home in my driveway, you know, I got a house that's comfortable. I got things I want to do, you know, and I just get out of the car and I go in my house.
You don't want to do them in the car? Watch television, take a Zoom call?
In my driveway. No, I don't want to do any of that. Occasionally, I've gone into the car for a quiet place to record my podcast intro. But to your point, there's a race among some automakers to put a lot of doodads and fancy stuff, and to be able to say it's a lifestyle vehicle. That's my favorite. I've been hearing that for all my career. It's a lifestyle. Well, what is it, a lifestyle vehicle exactly? So but we're talking about dependability. That's the best thing they can do. Design quality in so it doesn't cost me, you know, $2,500 to replace a $40 part. You know, do these things. Make it so the horn beeps when I reach optimal. There's like 200 smart things they could design into every car that everybody would love. But they don't want to copy one another. There's competition internally about whose idea gets put up. That's the stuff that gets in the way of quality.
I have a question about especially cost, because in terms of dependability and the desirability of certain different lifestyles in your vehicle, can you describe the split between luxury buyers and is there like a tax bracket breakdown of people's responses?
I mean, what we're seeing really the big divergence right now is with technology. Again, going back to this, where we see in the premium models this year, everybody remained pretty flat year over year. So it was 209 problems about with premium vehicles, where we saw a big uptick with mass market vehicles. A lot of that was because of integration of new infotainment systems, new driving assistance features coming into those mass market vehicles, where they actually saw degradation of 16 problems per 100 year over year. So a huge shift, and that's really what we saw drive the industry up as a whole, was come from those mass markets. So maybe these premium buyers are starting to overcome some of these obstacles. Maybe they're getting used to some of these technology features within their vehicle, and now they're shifting into mass market vehicles. So, and we're starting to see that.
You know, the split that I found fascinating was between electric plug-in hybrid, and ICE.
That's right. Yeah.
And BEVs showed a big improvement,
Mhm.
but you found that PHEVs had the biggest problems.
Exactly. Yeah. We briefly touched on it a little bit before going live, but a lot of it is like you're almost getting a little bit of both negative worlds. So you're getting some of those problems that you're seeing within the industry for the ICE side of it, but you're also getting those top problems that you're seeing from the BEV side of it. So, overcoming those obstacles is difficult, where a lot of focus right now for the auto industry has been on all electric vehicles. So addressing those issues, but we know PHEVs are still going to be very prevalent moving forward. So I think the industry will start tackling those as well. But a lot of it
and
is
you found that hybrids were the best of all.
Yeah.
Which, because hybrids are not exactly simple, compared to ICE or diesel, pure ICE or pure diesel. And yet hybrids scored better than pure ICE or diesel. Well, how do you read that?
It was an interesting finding, of course, but I think a lot of that is coming down to, okay, now I just have this vehicle that it has longer range. I don't really have to mess with going to the electric charging ports and different things like that. So it has become easier for a lot of customers just to not to deal with all these issues that they want to have from the ICE side of it, but they're getting now within the hybrid. So I think a lot of it is driven by reducing some of those issues when it comes to plugging in the vehicle.
And Jason, we're getting down to the end of the segment, but who else did well? If I remember off the top of my head, Mazda, Honda, Porsche were all, really towards the top.
Yeah, they all had really good years this year. I mean, there was big improvements in the industry for some models, of course, but you're really dominated by the GM and the Toyotas this year. So you think 12 awards just from those two alone. Nissan had a couple awards as well. So the Murano and the Kicks had
good for
awards.
Nissan. Finally, some good news for Nissan.
Right? But there were some good stories in the models that were able to cover. One of the big stories this year were the model launches. So there was 27 new model launches this year within our study for 21 model or 22 model years. So you think of that time during COVID, there was chip shortages, there was disruption in production. So of these 27 models that were launched, only 4 actually performed better than that segment average. So it just shows that difficult time to launch a vehicle, especially with these new infotainment systems, new driving assistant features in the vehicles as well. So a lot of problems across the industry when it came to launching vehicles, to be expected though. So we saw within our 90 days of ownership at 22 model year vehicles, there was an 11% increase in problems as well. So, they got a little bit better. 3 years of ownership is still problematic.
Real good. We're going to have to wrap this up. Jason, thanks so much for coming on the show. Very interesting.
Great.
Yeah, good data there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we got a lot of data points at JD Power, so
that's great.
Happy to be here. So thank you.
We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back talking about news in the industry this week.
Knowing that a little rain won't slow down your day, that's what really matters. Bridgestone Turanza Quiet Track tires, confident control in wet conditions.
Happy man, it was nice to meet each of you.
Yeah.
Talk again.
Real good. Okay. We'll see you.
Water over here somewhere.
Good to see you again. Yeah.
Take care.
Take care.
Nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thanks, guys.
So we're back talking about news of the week. And I guess you didn't want to get into politics. I don't know how we can avoid it.
No, it's fine. I want to talk about politics in the context of JD Power and legal dependability.
Yeah. But, Tesla's just a spate of bad news, sales cratering around the world, stock price taking a huge, huge hit. And then yesterday we saw President Trump out in the yard of the White House with a bunch of Teslas. And
that he apparently can't drive.
Well, Secret Service will not allow a president to drive a car.
Except they let Biden and Obama do it. So
yeah, just in a very controlled circumstance, right? So. But what'd you make of it? I mean, Elon needs that kind of publicity.
So I did a fairly deep dive on Ward's that's on the website today, not just rounding up what we know, but making the point, there's a reason why CEOs of publicly traded companies don't get overtly involved in politics until maybe they're outside of their role as a CEO. And I cited, these studies and about why you don't do it. You alienate a bunch of your consumers, you can alienate a bunch of your employees. Nothing good comes of it, is basically what these studies have long said. which is why, if you look at FEC records, which I've done from time to time, you hardly ever see big donation trails of CEOs of publicly traded companies. They channeled their contributions through the company's PAC, and now, because of the way the Supreme Court ruled on this, they can give money to PACs and their names won't be released and things like that. But this is unprecedented in the U.S. at least, what Musk is doing. And
aren't we sick of that word? Unprecedented. I've heard it so many times in the past 5 years.
Yeah. But I mean, and often you'd have a board if a CEO was doing things to hurt the company. You'd have a board react. No, not the Tesla board. I mean, Tesla board is his friends and people he's richly rewarded. They're not going to tell. Very few people are going to tell Elon Musk he shouldn't do something. We saw in the Isaacson book, there was a galaxy of people telling him not to do the Cybertruck the way he wanted to do it. Didn't matter, just went ahead and did it. And it's a fiasco. They're going to have severe capacity problems next year and the year after, because demand is just dropping off a cliff.
Jackie, your read of the situation. Trump with Musk on primetime TV, I mean, essentially selling cars.
That's something that we've been asking the Detroit Three pretty frequently. How do you feel about the potential for another competitor to have such close ties with the president, to have such obvious and overt perceived views of conflicts of interest? And I think it kind of got to that point when the cuts were happening, and we saw what happened to NHTSA in particular. And when I was trying to drill into which roles were lost at NHTSA, as several investigations into Tesla were ongoing, there was a very small team at NHTSA that focused specifically on advanced driver systems or autonomous vehicle tech. There was like 6 people on this team. 3 of them lost their jobs. So if half of the team that's investigating the CEO of a company is lost, ostensibly due to a project he may or may not have been very much in charge of, that's a little bit alarming. That's a little bit concerning. What is church and state in this environment? And again, I'm not as old as I might actually be or appear to be. But in terms of just during the bankruptcy, obviously we've seen what happens when the Michigan contingent needs to go to Washington to plead their case, to make it clear what value the auto industry has to the economy and to not just our state, but several others that are dependent on vehicle manufacturing and supplying, and the entire nexus of building and selling vehicles and financing them is so much more complex than people realize, that there's a danger to introducing an element when someone considers, well, this does seem complicated. What if we just got rid of it? Disruption is one of my favorite words. When they're like, well, we got to disrupt this market. All I hear when they say that is, there's a lot of money here. How can I get some?
Yeah.
And it's just something that it's very bizarre that dealers and auto people in the industry, when they're looking towards government, it's typically to say, stay away from us, get out of our business, unless it can help us make money.
Yeah.
In which case, come, remember us? Please help us, get involved, invest, or protect. Yeah. So I think it's bizarre and unprecedented, though I have much less experience with which to say that. But again, I've been covering the auto industry since 2017. I started on the cusp of the Donald Trump presidency, and I've returned to the auto industry covering it on the cusp of a Donald Trump presidency. So it's been a fascinating bookmark.
Well, I forget you or you, John, who used the phrase that we all know what it means, conflict of interest. I have covered Donald Trump since, in one fashion or another for a long time. He doesn't recognize the concept. He literally doesn't recognize the concept of conflict of interest. If it's in his interest, it's in everybody's interest. And I'm not saying that to be political. I'm saying that's a fact. I've watched and covered this guy for decades, this is the way he is. And it's a clear and obvious conflict of interest, what's happening with him and Musk and the money that pours in and getting rid of, what is the first thing he did? He wanted to get rid of inspector generals. The first thing he turned to try to get rid of the whistleblowers whose job it is to blow the whistle on, wait for it, conflicts of interest and corruption and stuff that doesn't make sense, malfeasance. This is what the inspector generals do. They were the first to go. At least he's trying to get rid of them. It's the last bastion of normal democracy are the courts that are trying to slow them up.
Okay, back to automotive, but
Yeah.
not
Well,
necessarily out of politics.
Say we're not a field of automotive because we're awash. The automotive industry is awash in what's going on.
But we also saw the EPA come back and say it's going to roll back a bunch of stuff. Now, I got to say, for automotive, there's a lot of stuff that I agree there. I think that the EPA standards, as they were set under the Biden administration, were unattainable by the industry. It was a moonshot effort that was really going to hurt the industry. So I like the fact that they're paring back, but maybe it's going a little too far, or I don't know. Have you followed this, Jackie?
Well, a lot of the automakers like to say that they make changes and they don't need to be regulated, that they're trying to make their vehicles more sustainable, more fuel efficient, energy efficient, all of those things. And that these regulations, either they're outdated or the people in charge don't even understand the process that goes into them. So I think another important point is that vehicle product cycles aren't as truncated as people imagine them to be. A lot of the decisions that the automakers are making happened 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and they're coming to bear now. So when we talk about how flexible and durable the industry is, there's not a lot of flexibility when it comes to billions of dollars of investments and planned products and ideas. If they're trying to push ahead with infrastructure, with dealer education and consumer adoption of electric vehicles as a way to meet these standards, the changes in the standards, it's almost too little too late. So if the EPA is going too far, a lot of the people involved might think, well, we've come this far to make these changes already. We can wait 3 more years, 7 months or so, and then we'll see what happens. But a lot of these, if the auto industry can turn on a dime, we had an article this week about that at the Free Press. And the answer is no, it can't turn on a dime because the dimes are already invested. People are driving around those dimes right now. They're filling them with electricity. And it doesn't matter who's in the White House for a long period of time.
Great point. Great point. Here we are sitting in 2025. Everything for 2028 is already done.
Yeah.
So talk about, the inability to spin on a dime like that. And it's, like I said, everything's been set.
The one thing I'll say is that cars would not be as clean burning today, nor would they be as safe for crash safety or occupancy safety if the government didn't regulate it. We just wouldn't be anywhere near here. I was working on a story when I came on your show, just kind of researching like exactly how much cleaner the vehicle tailpipe emissions are now versus 1975, and it's enormous. It's enormous.
99 point whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Cleaner.
It's amazing, and that was done by government regulation because there's a social benefit that's kind of been agreed upon, and because of the cost of taking it further to combat climate change, there's been a big force. Now, it didn't happen yesterday. It's been a big force of opposition in the last 10 years because, wait, cost benefit. It's going to cost this much. It's going to increase our cost this much. What is the actual benefit and things like that? So, but disruption's okay. Disruption's okay. But the speed of it that these folks are expecting and this nonsense with the tariffs, which is pure nonsense, these companies have been playing by the rules. They've been making massive investments on either side of the border. They had no expectation that, and shouldn't have had, that the deal that they've been working on, which was struck in the first Trump administration, was going to be essentially repealed. It's not fair, and it's stupid because it's
well, we don't know the final results yet.
We don't, but at least the threats.
Who knows the final results?
Threats are stupid.
Right.
The threats are stupid.
Well, but going back to your point on government regulation, I agree. Cars are cleaner and safer today because of government regulation. And that's where the government should step in. When the marketplace is not going to fix this on its own or is going to take too long to do it. But I will say the Biden administration fuel economy rules and emissions were way too stringent. And I would also argue that NHTSA's safety mandates have not done anything to reduce highway or motor vehicle fatalities and injuries. I mean, nothing. It's gotten worse in the last decade.
Well, my only pushback on that is that they can do everything that they can do under the sun to make the car safer. But what they can't do is keep people from staring into their phones when they should be driving. And that, I don't know about you, John, but man, when I see so many cars acting weirdly on Route 94, which we travel all the time, and every time I pull up, literally there's somebody with a phone up like this while they're trying to drive. I mean, that's not on the OEMs. In fact, someday we're going to have to figure out a way to prevent that. I'm not sure exactly how, but
you would think with things like, forward collision warning, automated braking, blind spot detection, you would think that would have overcome some of that stuff. I think
it becomes standard.
It's all standard now. It's on every vehicle.
Tell that to my car parked outside.
Well, yeah.
Well, that's a good point. But I mean, obviously something they can do is not make flat screens that are this big that I have to take my entire face away from the road in order to change the climate or the song that's playing. But there's the element of, yes, people are people. They put their makeup on behind the wheel. They text. They get drunk and try to drive. And there are catastrophic consequences of that. And obviously the automakers can do what they can. They can make those investments and standardize them. But, I talk with our auto critic all the time, Mark Phelan, about these specific pieces and functions that the vehicle can have, these features. And the first thing we ask is, well, can you shut them off? That's boring. Like I hate that the buzzing. It's annoying. I don't know. Like when the car's trying to drive for me, leave me alone. I know what I'm doing. And that is the hubris that can start a lot of these incidences on the road. And obviously we dream of the utopia where my car can communicate to the one behind it and the one behind that and the one behind that there's an object on the highway and I need to brake suddenly. But until we get to a place where the software can be integrated across vehicles, that they're all working in harmony and doing better than the humans can, that's something that's going to take time and investment and regulation and cooperation between automakers that are competitors and possibly regulation. Yeah. So it's hard to think of the utopia that, the ideas of which may or may not be coming from Silicon Valley, but there is a threat to that in a way, that long-termism concept that, to get to this mobility future that we're all striving towards, we have to do the testing. We have to try this out in the market. And there will be, and already have been, fatalities. So there's no easy way. Do I trust a robot? Do I trust a person? Depends on the person. Depends on the robot. Where are we? So I think it's crazy. But going back to your idea of like what the marketplace can decide, what is the marketplace? I go back to the courts comment we made. It's up to us. The onus has always been on the U.S. citizen to determine if the product is dangerous. And we usually do that by litigation. We have to prove the Roundup causes cancer or that the weird orange dye in the Kraft mac and cheese is probably not for human consumption. But when it comes to vehicles and safety, we have historical evidence that there are rooms in these automaking companies that they discuss these things. Well, we could fix it, or we could pay out the lawsuits. So what's the choice? What's the, whenever people ask me about what it is to be a business reporter, I say there's literally one thing you ever have to think about, which is the goal of a company is to take in more money than it puts out. That's it. Every decision centers around that concept alone. So where are they saving money? Where are they spending money? And what happens?
You're reminding me of a memory I have from my middle school journalism class.
Oh, God.
When the teacher asked the class, what is the purpose of the news media? And because my father was a newspaper man, I knew it's to make money. Everybody was, to inform the public. And no, it's to make money.
Some cane. I know.
Okay, switching gears a little bit. Nissan got a new CEO. I don't know if you guys have followed this. Guy's name is Ivan Espinosa, and apparently from Mexico.
Yes, they were born in Mexico. First Mexican-born CEO of a global auto company, so far as I can tell. So,
really?
Wait a minute. Where's Jose Munoz at
Spain?
Oh, he's Spanish. Okay, so but still, I found it very interesting that Nissan once again went to a non-Japanese CEO. Carlos Ghosn being the one that a decade ago or whatever they went with. But I found it very interesting that they went from somebody outside, the Nissan Japanese sphere to run the company.
I think it's. I thought it was interesting too. Is my guess, and I have talked to some people, but about this, it's hard. It can be hard to get too close to the workings of a Japanese company's board and et cetera, et cetera. But done the best I could. He's a really good, well thought of guy internally. So, hats off to the board, which is also not all Japanese, for it looks like just choosing a meritocracy. That this guy is up and coming. He knows the company through and through. He's not a disciple of Uchida, although Uchida put his arm around him. But he's going to be his own guy and recommend to the board where to go with Honda or an equity investor like Foxconn or some sort of partnership like that. He looks like a very solid choice. He's a product guy, which is good, rather than a finance treasury guy, because Nissan's got some serious lineup issues globally, a lot of deficiencies that they have to fix. But it looks good. I have to say, and I'll just plug, our stuff. We said in December that this merger was unlikely to happen
with Honda.
The way it was laid out.
Well, Honda wanted nothing to do with it. It was the body language that they were giving off.
Yeah, and gave all the reasons why. I think with Uchida out of the way, the door is at least unlocked and cracked, to maybe get back to that. But we'll have to see exactly what this guy and what the board really wants to do. The original structure was to have Nissan and Honda operating under a newly formed holding company. Almost like the thing that it feels most similar to is the Nissan and Renault alliance. Frankly, it looks very similar to that, except with a true common ownership through a holding company. So I would like to see the merger happen the way Honda wanted to do it, steering the train, because obviously Honda's a much, much, much better managed company in every measurement you could imagine, from product to shareholder return. So
I always go back to the dealers. If the dealers like them, that's all that matters, because they know their business, they know what they need from the product standpoint, and if they think this person's going to help right the ship, and if they fall in line behind them, then it's going to work out.
Be fascinating to see what the dealers have to say about this guy. They probably don't even know him yet, so they're probably going to have to get to know him. Another thing that I saw, this week in China, this company Xpeng is getting into humanoid robots. In fact, they said they might invest as much as $14 billion in them. Tesla's doing humanoid robots. BMW is already using them in some operations in its plants and the like. What do you guys make of this? Robots coming into the plants. I mean, there's always been like spot welding and painting robots, but these are robots that get up and walk around, pick up parts, and do things. What do you think, Jackie?
They're going to turn on us. It's the beginning of the end. Well, I thought, wasn't Tesla, was that really a robot, or wasn't that just a person operating the vehicle?
In a suit?
Yes.
In a robot suit?
I mean, my thing is...
They're remotely controlled to a degree.
Yeah.
But,
right.
But you know where this is going, where it's not going to be remotely controlled.
Yeah.
I have a very specific view on this, because when I was at Automotive News, one of the biggest and first projects I worked on was the intersection of the opioid epidemic and the manufacturing industry. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't very difficult for me to find a worker at a Ford plant who had an umbilical hernia that he suffered working on the line and ended up getting drug addicted because of that. And this was the time where they were overprescribing opioids. And obviously with his UAW benefits, he had amazing coverage. But this began this cycle of addiction. And when he explained to me how he got the umbilical hernia, it seemed ludicrous. He's like, well, for 12, 13 hours a day, I would bend completely in half, pick up a very heavy part, stand up, and put it on a vehicle. It was in one of Ford's Kentucky truck plants. And I was thinking, that's ridiculous. Like, why would they do that? Why would any person think that that was okay for a human body to undergo? And so when you think about robotic assistance on the line now, a lot of these investments are to protect workers rather than necessarily replace them. I don't know if we're going to end up quickly on like a sort of Star Wars, Clone Wars situation, or like those androids that are just completely doing everything, robots making robots. There's still human oversight, the software. If we have trouble connecting phones to cars, I don't know if we can trust an entire robot to build it without supervision. But there's still something to be said for the safety features that certain technology allows and the protections it offers to our frail organic bodies that have a very difficult job to do. Even if it seems simple, that mental strain and that physicality of just doing one thing over and over again for hours and hours, assembly line work is no joke. So my thoughts are, if they're willing to invest in something that helps their workers and protects people, saves lives, that's overwhelmingly a positive thing. However, at the same time, how effective it is, and if companies are going to jump the gun and make some of these changes before they're ready, which we've seen companies do time and time again. I mean, there's plenty of people out there who think a robot can do my job pretty easily. And, time will tell what happens with that mentality. But I think it's a possibly positive change. But as always, we've got to see what actually happens.
We're in a massive reckoning driven by artificial intelligence. I mean, and the reason that they'll do it, the reason why they'll do a plant that produces vehicles is somebody is measuring, okay, what are our costs over X number of years, putting in robots, reducing our line worker needs, having supervisors, having people who are trained at guiding the AI tools in factories and things like that. We're in it. I mean, that ship has sailed. Every company that manufactures with an assembly line is either ankle deep or knee deep in this right now. And to your point about replacing us, that's already happening. I mean, there's a lot of websites that there's one or two people who are just deciding what the AI content is going to be that they're going to load up on the site and get their clicks and traffic, however it comes through tactics and whatever. And it's cheaper than having a staff of 14 people, and just take that to a factory. I mean, one of the reasons that we've seen the entire call center business in the US go to India, basically, is that, and I looked at this years ago when I was working at Business Week, the call out rate at a call center in the US can be higher than 20% on every day, 20% you can be looking at a day with 20% of your workforce called out. And that doesn't happen in
You're talking absenteeism.
Absenteeism, yes. And so to your point, people get hurt, people get drug addicted, people use drugs, so all kinds of people problems that you can have at a factory. Also, I'm just going to say, I don't mean to make anybody angry. Last time I checked, the robots weren't going to have a union, and they'll need maintenance, but they're not going to need health care. And they don't have families that have to be covered on health care. So, I mean, that's for another day, but the elephant in the room about how much manufacturing is here versus Canada and Mexico, a lot of it boils down to hourly wage and healthcare costs. And, until they fix those things, we're just going to be hitting the ping pong ball back and forth across the table with, so.
Yeah. Well, look, we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank the both of you for being here. Jackie Charniga from the Detroit Free Press, David Kiley from Ward's Auto. Great to have had Jason Norton from JD Power earlier on the show. But we're going to wrap it up here, and I want to thank all of you for having tuned in.
AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.